Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everybody. And look, we have a pretty major situation brewing right now. The very real possibility of a U.S. government shutdown. This Friday night, in fact. So we've been combing through a whole bunch of reports, trying to make sense of it all, looking at the timeline, who the key players are, what they're disagreeing on, all of that.
You hit the nail on the head. And that's exactly what we want to do in this deep dive. We're going to, cut through all the political noise and get down to what's really going on here. Why is this happening now specifically? And what could it actually mean for all of us?
Because, on the surface, you see a Republican-controlled House passed a funding bill. Seems like things are moving, right? But then Democrats were basically like, nope, we're blocking it in the Senate. And now, get this, there's been a total strategic shift, all because of a very specific fear, a worry that nobody really saw coming.
Right. And what makes this so interesting, so different, is that it's not just the usual, back and forth about budget stuff. There's something else going on that seems to have convinced the Democrats to change their minds.
And that something else brings us to two names that are always in the news. President Trump, obviously, and then Elon Musk. With his whole Department of Government Efficiency thing, the DOGE. We're going to break down how they've basically become the wild card in this showdown.
So I guess the logical place to start is, well, what's in this House bill that's causing so much drama? What are we even talking about here?
So rewind to Wednesday, March 12th. The House passes this bill to, keep the government funded through September. But it's not just keep the lights on. There were some big changes buried in there.
Changes that, as you said, really set off the Democrats. So, what were the biggies? What ticked them off?
Okay, so major point of contention. A $6 billion increase in military spending. But then, at the same time, they're slashing $13 billion from non-defense programs. And then you've got a whole thing tied to Trump's tariffs, which, as we all know, has been a constant battle. That $6 billion for the military, it probably lines up with what Republicans have been pushing for, right? Strong national defense and all that. But that $13 billion they're cutting, that is a lot of stuff the Democrats care about, like social programs, education, things like that. So right there, you have two totally different ideas about how to run the country.
Yeah, classic budget battle, right? One side's priorities clashing with the other.
So how did the Democrats react? Was it pretty much what you'd expect?
Pretty much. A lot of them came out swinging right away. Senators like Elizabeth Warren, Alyssa Slotkin, they were not holding back. They basically said, look, we want a chance to change this bill, to make amendments. We don't just want it shoved down our throats.
Makes sense. So were they focused on specific parts of the bill, or was it more of a general objection to the whole thing? They had some major concerns. One big one was that this bill would basically give Trump and Musk, way too much power over how the government spends money. They were worried about decisions being made without anyone really checking, and that leading to cuts where they really shouldn't be cutting. Slotkin in particular, she was worried about infrastructure projects in Michigan getting axed, which makes sense for her, representing that state and all.
So it's not just the total amount of money, it's about who gets to decide what to do with it, especially with someone like Musk involved, who's openly said he wants to shrink the government. So then what happened? What made the Senate Democrats do this total 180?
That's the million-dollar question. Thursday evening, Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, he drops this bombshell. He's going to support the Republican bill, the same one they were against just a day before.
Whoa, that's a serious change of heart. So what was his explanation? Why the sudden switch?
The big reason he gave was to avoid a shutdown, obviously, but he's also very specific about what he's afraid of. Trump and Musk basically dismantling all these essential government services if a shutdown actually happens.
Yeah, I remember seeing his statement. Didn't he use some pretty strong wording about it?
He did. He called it a Hobson's choice, meaning you're basically picking between two bad options. In his mind, they got to support this flawed bill to stop Trump from basically throwing the whole country into chaos.
So he's basically saying the risk of a shutdown under these specific circumstances is worse than any problems with the bill itself. What exactly is he so freaked out about, though?
His exact words were that a shutdown would give Trump and Musk carte blanche to destroy vital government services at a significantly faster rate than they can right now. The worry is that a shutdown, with all the chaos and less oversight, would be the perfect cover to push through some really big, really permanent changes.
Okay, so this brings us back to DOGE, that Department of Government Efficiency. What are the Democrats saying about that in relation to all this shutdown stuff?
Basically, they think Musk sees a shutdown as his chance to go all in on his vision of a smaller, more efficient government. What they're scared of is that he'll use his time to, like, go through everything, find what he considers non-essential, and just get rid of it for good. It's not just about agencies closing their doors for a bit. It's about the whole structure changing. Like, what happens if DOGE comes in and says this entire department is useless? With a shutdown, they might be able to pull it off.
And that's not just, paranoia, right? There have been some pretty clear signs that have fueled this fear.
Oh, absolutely. Remember that whole thing on X? Someone suggested not rehiring furloughed workers, and Musk just responds with that thinking face emoji, like just one emoji. But for the Democrats, it was like, oh, he is totally on board with shrinking the government workforce.
And ironically, some Republicans have actually, confirmed these worries without even realizing it.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, for example, he actually said that by opposing the bill, Democrats are helping Trump and Musk figure out which parts of the government are non-essential. Like, he was practically begging them to use a shutdown for that. And then you have Senator James Lankford saying a shutdown would be a clear moment to declare who's essential and who's non-essential. And that's a moment right now in the middle of the DOGE conversations. It's like they're not even hiding it anymore.
Those statements, even if they're just meant to pressure the Democrats, they definitely make it seem like some Republicans are seeing a shutdown as a chance to, reshape the government. But this whole thing with Schumer switching sides, I mean, not everyone in his own party is happy about it.
Not even close. It's caused some serious tension, especially among, the progressive Democrats. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, for example, she straight up called it outrage and betrayal. No beating around the bush there.
And she's not alone. We're hearing that some other Democratic senators, like Mark Kelly and Alyssa Slotkin, they're still planning to vote against the bill. It puts them in a tough spot, right? Stuck between this bill they hate and the possibility of a shutdown that they're even more afraid of.
And meanwhile, the Republicans are just doubling down, saying that if Democrats don't vote for the bill, they're basically doing exactly what Trump and Musk want.
Classic political spin, right? Both sides trying to make the other guys look bad.
Yeah.
So where's Trump in all this? What's he been saying?
He's keeping it simple. He's basically saying, look, if there's a shutdown, it's not our fault. He's pointing to the House, how they all voted for the bill, trying to make it seem like it's all on the Democrats.
Okay, so with all this back and forth, with everyone maneuvering and spinning, what are the actual real-world consequences of a shutdown that are worrying the Democrats so much?
Oh, the potential fallout is huge. They're worried about federal employees getting furloughed. And Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, she was especially concerned about how it would affect veteran services, which is obviously a sensitive topic. Then there's the whole thing with government agencies shutting down, maybe even for good. Gillibrand used some strong language talking about serious harm and how some departments might never open up again. It's clear they're not messing around.
And to really understand why they're so worried, we need to look back at past shutdowns, right? Like, how does the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, how does that fit into all of this?
The OMB basically becomes the decider during a shutdown. They're the ones who say which parts of the government keep running and which ones have to close.
So they have a lot of power to shape how a shutdown actually affects people. And this is where those worries about Trump and Musk come back in, right?
100%. There was this quote from a former Trump administration official. They said the White House might actually be very comfortable with the shutdown because it basically gives the OMB free rein over spending decisions. And that kind of unchecked power, it lines up perfectly with what DOGE is all about, with cutting government spending. This idea of a painless shutdown being used to push for less government. That's both fascinating and kind of scary, don't you think? Like, what if everything keeps running smoothly? And then they're like, see? We don't even need all those other agencies.
Whoa, yeah, that's a whole other level. So, okay, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. The Senate's supposed to vote on this funding bill Friday afternoon, and the clock is ticking, right? 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, that's the deadline. What should we be paying attention to, procedurally, in the Senate? So, it's different from the House. In the Senate, most bills need 60 votes to get past all the procedural stuff and actually have a final vote. The Democrats have 47 seats, plus a few independents who usually side with them, so if they all stuck together, they could have blocked the bill. But with Schumer now saying he'll support it, it's a whole new ballgame.
So it all comes down to how many other Democrats follow his lead, even with people like Kelly and Slotkin saying they're not on board. And then you've got Rand Paul, a Republican, who's already said he's voting no. This one's going to be close, right down to the wire.
So, big picture. Senate Democrats are basically stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're about to vote for a bill they hate, mainly because they're terrified of what'll happen if there's a shutdown. They're convinced that Trump and Musk will use it to gut the government. using this DOGE thing as their weapon. It's like they think a shutdown will be the perfect storm for Trump and Musk to push through all their ideas about shrinking the government, even if it means cutting essential services. So they're voting for this bill, not because they like it, but because they think it's the least bad option.
It's that Hobson's choice Schumer was talking about. They're picking the lesser of two evils, as far as they're concerned.
This whole situation really makes you think, though, about what happens when you have these powerful people from the private sector coming in and trying to reshape the government. Like, what does efficiency really mean when we're talking about things like public services? And who actually benefits from these big, sweeping changes? It's a question we all need to be asking ourselves.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance, right, between making the government work better and making sure it still provides the services and protections that we all need. Is this just a necessary shakeup, or is it something way more fundamental, something that could change how our government works forever? It's definitely something to keep in mind as we watch all of this play out.